And the headline right now is Russell Wilson is going to meet with the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants. And I think on the surface, that sounds like it's great news for Russell Wilson, Aaron Torres, that two teams are interested in Russell Wilson's services. But when you look at the list of free agents in the NFL, and you look at those that have signed and those that haven't, there are far more players that have signed and found teams than haven't. We're actually in the new league year, so that 2-day window where you can sign where it's legal but it's not really official yet, that's over. Everything is now fair game. It's good to go. And Russell Wilson still hasn't found a home. And to me, that is not a good sign for Russell Wilson. And when you also see that Aaron Rodgers' name is out there at this point, I think it's an even worse sign for Russell Wilson. I know that Russell Wilson's going to have meetings later this week with Cleveland and the New York Giants. But in my heart of hearts, I think it's over for Russell Wilson. I think it is done for Russell Wilson as a starting quarterback in the National Football League, and I'm not even sure of his value as a backup considering some of the other circumstances we see in the NFL.
Yeah, and I know this is a little bit off topic to start, but you covered his career for so long as a Seahawks fan. You probably paid closer attention than most. I was going to ask you, like if there is no starting spot, or if this is the last year where he even has an opportunity to earn a starting spot, is this just a guy that immediately transfers or translates into TV or to the private business world? Because to your point, yes, maybe he will get one more shot this year because there's way more teams than quarterbacks that are good enough to be starting in this league. But I don't see, he certainly isn't like a Chase Daniel type that's going to stay till whatever, mentor younger guys and stuff. So I was just curious.
I don't think he's going to be with an internet startup or a new web-based hot Twitter handle that breaks down film. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think Aaron Torres, you're going to expand and bring Russell Wilson in for newfound NFL coverage. I don't think that's going to happen at all.
Not filling in on the weekends on Fox Sports Radio.
Not filling in on the weekends. And you want to know why? You want to know why he's not going to be on CBS and he's not going to be on Fox, or shouldn't be? Because he can't criticize anyone. He can't criticize anything and say that. Like everything that we hear out of Russell Wilson's mouth, I don't know if we really believe. So if you put him on a TV set at some point in his career, I'm not sure if that's even going to work for him, because I don't know if he can be even critical. And if you'd actually believe what he was saying, because he seems to be so positive and seems to put on this front when speaking to anybody.
So when James Brown throws the highlight to him and the Jags are down 41-10, Jags country, let's ride. That's kind of hitting.
No, it's going to be if there's a pick six, you'd be like, oh, tough job for Trevor Lawrence there. Thought he had the guy, but sometimes the DB just makes a better play. There's nothing you can do about it. Like that's what you would get. There would be like a big shout out to Trevor Lawrence. I love the guy. That's what the analysis would be if Russell Wilson wanted to be on TV.
You're a Seahawks fan who's watched way too many Russell Wilson press conferences in your life.
Over and over. But the whole free agency process and what has gone on over the last couple of years is the writing that's on the wall for Russell Wilson. When you look at free agency right now and we see the spots that have been filled, we're going to just start with his most recent spot. This is why Russell Wilson's career is likely over. The narrative out of Pittsburgh throughout this offseason has been, we're not going to bring back both quarterbacks. We're going to bring back one. Or we could bring back one. We could bring back none. But I'll tell you one thing we're not going to do. We're not going to bring back two. They were not going to bring back both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. Well, Justin Fields is no longer available. He is not able to go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers because he signed a $20 million a year contract with the New York Jets. So the narrative out of Pittsburgh is we're not going to bring both back, but we may bring one back. We've been in communication with Justin Fields' people. We've been in communication with Russell Wilson's people. Justin Fields is now out of the equation. Guess what? Russell Wilson is still there. You just traded for DK Metcalf, who is familiar with Russell Wilson.
Totally fair.
So why isn't a deal done yet? Well, they would rather speak to Aaron Rodgers, who's 41, again, still trying to come back from an Achilles injury, in a place where you have no idea if he'd even work in the locker room and how much gas he actually has left in the tank. Russell Wilson's, 5 years younger than Aaron Rodgers. You would think that would be in his wheelhouse. But it's not. And you want to talk about locker room, I think there's just as much risk of putting Aaron Rodgers in a locker room than there is with Russell Wilson. I'm not sure on how much Russell Wilson fits in a locker room, especially now being in his mid-30s. It's one thing when you're a young guy and still trying to do your thing. Everybody else is your peers, but there's not a lot of 30-somethings in that locker room as well. But yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers may feel it'd be more valuable to have Aaron Rodgers, who plays better right now than Russell Wilson actually plays. That tells you something. And the Steelers had a full look for an entire year at Russell Wilson and aren't bringing him back. That's just one of the reasons why I think it's done for Russell Wilson.
Well, that last part to me is the most important, right? Because, first of all, the on-the-field win-loss record speaks for itself. Starts 4-0, loses 6 of his final 8. 5 in a row to end the regular season. But what was the narrative when things were actually going good for Russell Wilson? Oh, this is Mike Tomlin's handpicked successor. What did Mike Tomlin say when Russell Wilson started out hot? This is why they pay me the big bucks,
Yes.
And the one thing that was kind of hammered home again and again and again and again during last season through the ups and, of course, the eventual downs was that the two of them, Mike Tomlin and Russell Wilson, had a great working relationship. And so to me, that speaks to if the one guy in the league that you seemingly had the trust of, because we know Sean Payton didn't trust him, we know that Pete Carroll didn't trust him, if now Mike Tomlin is saying either I've seen enough on film where you're not the guy, or I've lost trust in you as a dude when I was putting it out there for 2 straight months how much I liked it, how much we got along, we met privately. That's the part that would concern me because Mike Tomlin very publicly appeared to be in his corner when things were going well for Russell Wilson.
And think of the caliber of names that you just mentioned. Not only did Pete Carroll pass on Russell Wilson, he's actually passed on him twice. The first time they allowed him to leave Seattle to get that deal with the Denver Broncos, and they turned it over to Geno Smith. Pete Carroll now has another decision with the Raiders. Do I sign Russell Wilson or do I trade for Geno Smith and pay him more than I would pay Russell Wilson? Guess what? I'm going to go with Geno Smith on this one. I'm not going to go on Russell Wilson. So that's twice Pete Carroll has turned away from Russell Wilson. And Sean Payton, we know how that went. And like him or not, Sean Payton showed his worth with the Denver Broncos this past season with the growth of Bo Nix, the staff that he puts together and makes it one of the better defenses in the National Football League. The writing is on the wall. I would even say, Aaron, in his meeting with the Cleveland Browns, I don't know if it's a courtesy meeting, but this team just traded for Kenny Pickett and sits there at number 2 where we think they have a really decent shot at drafting Cam Ward as their starting quarterback. If he doesn't go number 1 to Tennessee, it could be an option there. So what's the point of even meeting with Russell Wilson if you've brought in Kenny Pickett? You're likely to take a quarterback, not convinced, but that could be a possibility. And you still have Deshaun Watson sitting there in that locker. There doesn't seem to make any sense or any room for him to even go to Cleveland. I don't know if he's just getting a courtesy interview, but there doesn't even seem to be a possible fit for him to go to Cleveland. And if it's between Kenny Pickett, let's say Deshaun Watson is not going to come back in 2025 at all, and they can wash their hands and do whatever with Deshaun Watson, and you don't take Cam Ward 2nd overall, you take Travis Hunter or someone else, you're going to have a battle between Kenny Pickett and Russell Wilson. Who do you really want to win that quarterback battle? You'd probably want Kenny Pickett, the younger quarterback, the one who's maybe getting a second chance, not the guy that's been around the league and tossed out between Super Bowl winning head coaches for the past 5 seasons.
Well, I'll say this. One, I would never push our audience to one of our competitors, but we have 4 screens on in studio right now, and one of them has a topic bar that says, are the Browns done adding quarterbacks this offseason? So we're not the only ones that don't really know what this meeting is about right now. I think everybody that cares about football, cares about the NFL, is asking the same question. And I think the other thing, too, Dan, is, you asked, in theory, who you would want to win a Kenny Pickett versus a Russell Wilson quarterback derby, if you will. I mean, here's the problem. If you're the Browns, and assuming it's not just a throwaway season, is the issue becomes, Kenny Pickett, I know, was in the division, left, and was at least with Philly, kind of in that winning culture. Russell Wilson was just in this division. We just saw it. After a couple games, when people figured things out, he was not very good. Had no answers for Baltimore, struggled late, struggled against the best, in the biggest games of his season. So now you're going to, in theory, if you're the Browns, bring him in. And to your point, the best case scenario, I guess, would be that he wins the starting quarterback job. And we kind of saw what he looked like in meaningful late December, early January AFC North games.
The Indianapolis Colts would rather pay Daniel Jones $14 million
Great call.
to compete with Anthony Richardson. Russell Wilson was viewed by the Indianapolis Colts. This is what they're telling you. They viewed him like they viewed Gardner Minshew and Joe Flacco.
Not
as
an
as a backup quarterback in case something went wrong. Because that was the plan with Anthony Richardson these last 2 years. Let's bring in a veteran to back him up, and if something goes wrong, the veteran can come in, or if Richardson gets hurt. I never understood the Flacco or Gardner Minshew scenarios with the Colts because they were just completely different than who Anthony Richardson was. But now the Colts say, we want competition. They would rather pay Daniel Jones $14 million a year to see if he can push Anthony Richardson. Russell Wilson is not getting $14 million a year, and it is not happening. And the Indianapolis Colts went away from their veteran ways over the last 2 years. Otherwise, wouldn't you bring in Russell Wilson to try to compete for that spot in a lesser spot, or at least be in consideration? He wasn't. Never was thought to be. And maybe the Colts are looking for big picture and a longer run if Daniel Jones works out under Shane Steichen. But that still goes back to the point is they didn't look at Russell Wilson as legit competition for Anthony Richardson in the starting quarterback gig. It's all of these decisions that other teams have made that didn't include Russell Wilson that tell us what Russell Wilson's future is. And aside from the fact Aaron Rodgers is still out there for all of these quarterback-needing teams to be able to, or quarterback-needing teams to grab Steelers, Giants, Browns. Aaron Rodgers is ahead of Russell Wilson in all of those spots if he wanted to be. And that's where I think Russell Wilson has to look at it and say, all right, what's my career? Am I really even good enough to be the backup sort of guy? Is that in my DNA to support a young quarterback if I'm going to be the number 2?
Well, how about this? The one team you didn't mention that added a quarterback this week was the team that added the guy who backed Russell Wilson up this year. And so the Jets, now listen, the Jets don't have a lot of good options with where they're drafting. They're not going to be in position to take a quarterback. But they just said, well, we'd rather take the guy that was benched for Russell Wilson. And I know Justin Fields is younger and he's certainly more athletic and he can do some things that Russell Wilson can't. But again, if the Jets were just looking for, the Jets clearly were limited in their options and took the guy that Russell Wilson beat out for a job last year. Probably not a great sign either.
The funny thing is, as well, with Justin Fields, again, gets $20 million. $20 million a season for the New York Jets. 2 years, $40 million was the contract. I don't think Russell Wilson's going to get close to any of that. No. By no means. And that's where you see it. I didn't think Aaron Rodgers was going to play in 2025. I think that the information now that we've seen through free agency and what he's doing, I think I think my assessment is probably wrong.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see him on the field and see him either in one of the 3 spots that we told us, Pittsburgh and with the Giants seemingly like the most recent ones. But if Pittsburgh really wanted to bring him back, again, they had a full season with him.
I know.
And they would rather roll the dice on what 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, wishy-washy Aaron Rodgers in terms of what is going to happen, not necessarily knowing where his mind is. They would rather roll the dice on that than to bring the guy that they had in their locker room for a year. That tells you all you need to know about Russell Wilson.
So 1 calendar year from now, Russell Wilson's completely out of the public eye, in your opinion?
I don't see how he can be a backup anywhere.
I agree. I was thinking about this really quick to lead the shot. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all right.
Remember, was it? I forget when, but it must have been after this season with the New England Patriots. But it was like a big sports radio topic of like Cam Newton can't be a backup because he's too famous to be a backup. And of course, it became what is that supposed to mean? And what's the hidden coded line? It's like, no, you can't have Cam Newton as your backup. In Cam Newton's case, it's because if things go haywire with the starter, people are going to demand for the back. But there's just something about having like a super famous dude that really can't do the job as your backup. We used to say the same thing about Tim Tebow. like having him as a backup, and I would put Russell Wilson in that same category. If you can't have him in the building because, if you're let's just, whatever. Say the Giants are bad, they draft a quarterback next year. Well, every time there's an open locker room after a game, people are going to go to Russell Wilson. So I know I cut you off before you could even answer, but I'm with you. I don't think he can be a backup.
Remember when Carmelo Anthony laughed about coming off the bench when he was in Oklahoma City?
Okay, see,
like he's like, they want me to come off the bench. Like it's the same thing. I actually thought that Russell Wilson needed the opportunity to be the guy to come to the rescue. And I thought that opportunity presented itself in Pittsburgh this past season. The problem is the Steelers fared pretty well with Justin Fields early. Then to your point about the comment that Tomlin made when Russell Wilson did take over and made plays mid-season, it looked, oh, there it is. Here's Russell Wilson to the rescue, adding a dynamic. But that bloom is now off that flower considering how the end of the season transpired. And so even to go into that spot, Aaron, of the role of saving the day, he's already tried it in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
And it didn't work as well as they would have hoped. So all of this stuff that we hear of the Giants and the Browns, he's plan B for all of them. The Browns it really doesn't make sense, especially after the Kenny Pickett deal, where they're drafting, what they're looking at. I don't understand it, but I just think that the writing is on the wall for everything that's happened so far in free agency, and what could be happening with Aaron Rodgers should tell Russell Wilson everything that he needs to know.
Last point from me is it wasn't a perfect situation in Pittsburgh because Tomlin's a defensive coach. They've never been super dynamic offensively. They've gone through OCs, but veteran head coach, has your back, really good defense. There were a lot of things working in Russell Wilson's favor in Pittsburgh that won't be working in his favor in New York, that won't be working in his favor anywhere that in theory he could still go. So under the assumption there's even a landing spot for him, I don't think the situation that he's going to fall to is going to be better than what he just had in Pittsburgh.
And just traded for a wide receiver who had his best career year with
Yes.
Russell Wilson, and he's not coming back. I think that tells you all you need to know.